Hello everyone, how are you today? I truly hope you're healthy and surrounded by happiness. As always, today we'll dive into a touching story that will stir your emotions, test your patience, and maybe even make you angry. This is the story of a wife who made an enormous sacrifice, only to be repaid with betrayal. Imagine this. For 5 long years, this woman worked non-stop to pay for her husband's entire education until he finally graduated from medical school. But what did she receive on his graduation day? Instead of gratitude, she was handed a divorce petition. Her husband told her arrogantly, "We're not on the same level anymore. I'm ashamed to have a wife as ordinary as you." After the divorce, the woman disappeared without a trace. However, a year later, her ex-husband, now a doctor, panicked and began searching for her desperately. What had happened to her? But before we continue, please give this video a like and tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. It's very important for us to know how far our stories reach. Thank you so much. Now, without further delay, let's get right into the story. That morning, loud applause echoed through the grand auditorium of Seattle National University. Among the excited families, Valerie Morgan sat with her heart overflowing. She discreetly wiped away the tears threatening to fall and looked toward the stage. There stood her husband, Ethan Parker, dressed in his gown and cap, holding the medical degree just handed to him by the dean. 5 years. 5 years of waiting, sacrifice, and unimaginable struggle had finally paid off. Valerie smiled. It was a sincere smile, though a little stiff from years of exhaustion. She looked at her slightly rough hands that hadn't known the luxury of a manicure in 5 years. Those were the same hands that mixed dough at dawn to make pastries for neighborhood cafes and typed reports late into the night. They were also the hands that massaged Ethan's back whenever he complained about being exhausted after endless nights of studying. Valerie had taken 2 jobs. She sold the jewelry she inherited from her mother and suppressed every personal desire. All for one dream: seeing Ethan wear a white coat. Beside her, Ethan's mother, Mrs. Ramona Parker, looked utterly proud. "My Ethan is finally a great doctor," Mrs. Parker exclaimed to a guest as she accepted congratulations. Dressed in an elegant designer suit and a perfectly styled updo, she glanced sideways at Valerie, who wore a simple dress. For a long time, Mrs. Parker hadn't hidden that she didn't like Valerie. Valerie came from a humble family and, according to her mother-in-law, she was unfit for her son's brilliant future. But Valerie didn't care. Ethan's love was enough for her. The ceremony ended. Ethan approached them with a wide smile, though that smile was mostly for Mrs. Parker. He hugged his mother tightly. "I did it, Mom," he said. "Of course, son. I always knew you were exceptional," Mrs. Parker replied, patting his back proudly. Valerie stepped forward to hug her husband. "Congratulations, honey." Ethan accepted the hug stiffly and pulled away immediately. "Yeah, thanks. Tonight we're having dinner at that new upscale restaurant that just opened. I made a reservation. We're going to celebrate," he said without looking her in the eyes. Valerie's heart grew heavy from his coldness, but she tried to understand. Maybe Ethan was tired or overwhelmed by emotion. "Sure, honey, whatever you want," she answered gently. That evening, the 3 of them sat in an elegant restaurant overlooking the dazzling night view of Denver. Valerie felt out of place. It was the most expensive place she had ever been. She looked at Ethan, who now wore a branded shirt and radiated confidence. Mrs. Parker couldn't stop taking pictures of her son to post on social media. "Honey, our effort has finally paid off. We can start a new life now," Valerie said, trying to start a warm conversation. Hearing this, Mrs. Parker let out a laugh. "You mean Ethan's effort? My son is a tireless worker and now he's a doctor. Of course his life will be new. He deserves the best." Valerie stayed silent. She expected Ethan to defend her, to say it had been their effort together, but he said nothing. He just flipped through the menu. After they ordered, a short silence fell. Ethan cleared his throat and looked at Valerie with a cold, unreadable expression. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Yes, honey," Valerie replied anxiously. Ethan opened his new leather portfolio and pulled out a brown envelope, placing it in front of her. Valerie frowned. "What is this, honey?" A job offer from the hospital. Beside him, Mrs. Parker smiled with superiority. That smile sent a shiver of dread down Valerie's spine. No. Open it, Ethan ordered. Valerie's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. She read the first lines of the official document and it felt as if the world stopped moving. The noise of the restaurant vanished. There, written clearly, were the words, "Divorce petition." Valerie lifted her gaze, shaking. Ethan, this must be a joke. What kind of joke is this? Today is your graduation. Ethan let out a deep sigh. His expression hardened as if the mask of happiness he had worn all day had suddenly fallen away. I'm serious, Valerie. We can't stay together. But why? What did I do wrong? For 5 years Valerie's voice cracked. Exactly because of that, Ethan interrupted harshly. 5 years were enough. Now I'm a doctor. I have a bright future ahead of me. I need someone who's on my level. Someone I can take to important meetings, someone who matches my social status. Ethan looked her up and down, judging her simple dress and tired, makeup-free face. We're not on the same level anymore. I'm ashamed to have such an ordinary wife. It struck Valerie like lightning out of a clear sky. Her head spun. Those cruel words came from the man she had supported and cared for all those years. Mrs. Ramona Parker stepped in with a triumphant voice. Did you hear him, Valerie? Ethan has different standards now. You should have known your place from the start. It's better for you two to separate now, before you become a burden and embarrass him in the medical community. Consider the money you earned as charity. The tears Valerie had been holding back finally fell, not as a few drops but as a relentless flood. Pain, humiliation, and betrayal tore her heart apart. Valerie looked at Ethan, searching for the man who once loved her, but all she found was an arrogant stranger. Then she looked at Mrs. Parker, who was smiling with satisfaction. Valerie bit her lip hard to suppress the sob that wanted to escape. She would not give them the pleasure of seeing her break. With violently trembling hands she crushed the divorce notice. The word charity, spat out by Mrs. Parker, fell like gasoline on the burning coals of her heart. Something inside her cracked, but instead of shattering, it sharpened into cold steel. Her tears stopped instantly. She lifted her head slowly and looked at the two people in front of her. Her gaze, once confused and full of pain, was now cold, hard, and unreadable. She wiped away the remaining tears abruptly. It was no longer the gesture of someone desperate, but the firm movement of someone who had made a decision. Ethan and Mrs. Parker were stunned by the sudden change. They expected Valerie to cry, beg, or even faint. Instead, Valerie fell into a terrifying silence. Enough. That single word came out rough from holding back tears, yet firm and absolute. Ma'am, I said enough, Valerie repeated, staring straight at her mother-in-law, who now looked unsettled. You said I had to know my place. That my sacrifices were charity. That I was a burden. Valerie let out a short laugh. A cold, cynical sound, more unsettling than hysterical crying. The laugh made Ethan uncomfortable. Did you really think I would stand by while you walked all over me? She turned toward Ethan, who now looked tense and confused. And you, Mr. Parker? The way she emphasized Mr. sounded like pure mockery. You say you're a doctor now. That your degree is yours. You're very wrong. Valerie rose slowly from her seat. Her movements were calm but full of contained fury. Her hand, the same hand that had crushed the notice, pointed straight at Ethan's face, which was beginning to pale. That degree is mine too. Her voice rose suddenly, startling Ethan, Mrs. Parker, and even the diners at nearby tables. Valerie didn't care. Every dollar that got you to that graduation came from my blood, sweat, and tears, she shouted. Every book you bought was food I took out of my own mouth. Her voice trembled with contained emotion. Every night you slept peacefully before an exam, I stayed awake until sunrise baking pastries to fill orders. Valerie jabbed her finger into his chest. You borrowed my body, my energy, and my entire life for 5 years just to buy that degree. Her breath was uneven. Rage was boiling through her. You said I'm not on your level. She laughed again, louder. You're right. I'm not on the level of a coward who betrays his wife on the night of his graduation. She turned her eyes to Mrs. Parker. And I will never be on the level of a mother who applauds her son's betrayal just for social status. Valerie grabbed her simple purse and added, emphasizing each word. You will both regret this. Wounded in his pride as a newly minted doctor and furious at being confronted in public, Ethan stood up. His face burned red with shame and anger. Valerie, sit down. Don't make a scene. What more do you want? Division of assets? We have nothing. Did you forget your money went toward my tuition? He yelled, trying to intimidate her. But Valerie smiled, and that smile froze Ethan's blood. Did you think I'm that naive, honey? She took out her phone, ignoring the stares around them. Ethan froze. He never imagined that Valerie had noticed everything. Valerie dialed her speed dial number. Attorney Henry Marks, good evening. Sorry for calling at this hour. Ethan frowned. Attorney Marks? Who is that lawyer? He asked suspiciously. Mrs. Ramona Parker, once arrogant, now looked uneasy. Valerie ignored them completely. Yes, this is Valerie. Our suspicions were correct. Yes, attorney, I received the notice tonight, just as we expected, exactly as you predicted. Ethan's heart started pounding. Suspicions. Predicted, Valerie repeated, her voice eerily calm. Please proceed. The certainty in her tone made Ethan and Mrs. Parker tense immediately. Process all the documents I left in your office last week, right away, Valerie added, her voice unwavering. Yes, attorney, everything, including the countersuit for betrayal and fraud. And most importantly, include the full breakdown of the damages claim for 5 years of education and living expenses. Send the summons to the address of the hospital where he'll start working next week as soon as possible. At the words damages claim, Mrs. Parker shot to her feet. Her once proud face turned completely pale. Countersuit? What damages, Valerie? Don't make things up. Are you insane? Are you trying to blackmail my son? She screamed, panicked. Valerie slowly ended the call, placed her phone in her purse and looked at Mrs. Parker with chilling calm. I'm not insane, ma'am. I'm simply demanding my rights. You yourself said all of this was an investment. Very well. I want my entire investment back. I have every transfer receipt, every tuition invoice, even every electricity bill I paid for 5 years. Then she turned to Ethan, who remained paralyzed. Did you really think you'd walk away freely, start a new life and find a wife on your level, thanks to the degree I bought with my blood and tears? You were terribly wrong. Valerie picked up the divorce notice from the table in front of Ethan and Mrs. Parker. She didn't tear it. She folded it carefully and placed it in her purse. It will be an excellent additional piece of evidence in court. Thank you. I won't sign your divorce, she said firmly. But I will divorce you. And I will make you pay for every drop of my effort before you show off that white coat. Without another word, Valerie turned and left the upscale restaurant with steady steps, leaving Ethan and Mrs. Parker frozen before the expensive dishes they hadn't even touched. That night Valerie didn't shed a single tear. Her burning fury had dried them all, leaving only steel-hard determination. Her steps were light, but each footprint felt like it scorched the cold marble floor. She crossed the lobby, ignoring the employees' surprised looks as they watched her leave alone after arriving accompanied. She stopped a cab and gave the address of Marissa Lane's studio, her only friend in Denver. During the ride, Valerie remained perfectly still. The city lights, which should have witnessed a celebration, now felt like a cruel joke. Ethan's arrogant face and Mrs. Parker's venomous smile flashed repeatedly in her mind. We're not on the same level anymore. That sentence hammered in her ears like a rusted nail. She tightened her grip on her phone. Inside it was the saved contact for Attorney Marks. This humiliation wouldn't be the end. It would be the beginning. Marissa opened the door of her small studio with a sleepy expression, but her eyes widened instantly when she saw Valerie at the entrance. What are you doing here at this hour? Shouldn't you be celebrating Ethan's graduation? Valerie stepped inside without answering. As soon as the door closed, her legs gave out and she leaned against the wall. He asked for a divorce, Marissa, she said in a hoarse voice. At the restaurant. Tonight. What? Marissa jumped. This has to be a joke. It can't be. Valerie repeated everything, her voice trembling. The arrogance of Ethan, the insults from Mrs. Parker, the divorce notice. That bastard, and his mother is no better. Marissa muttered, clenching her fists. Valerie stepped out of the hug and wiped her tears. I already called a lawyer. Attorney Marks. Marissa's eyes widened. A lawyer? Since when? Valerie lowered her gaze. Since 6 months ago. Since I realized Ethan was changing. Since I found proof that he was transferring money to another account behind my back. I just needed the final proof. And tonight he gave it to me. A few weeks later, the mediation room at the family court was filled with tension. Valerie Morgan, wearing a simple but immaculate dress, sat upright. Her expression was unreadable. Beside her, attorney Henry Marks, a sharp-eyed middle-aged man, organized a thick case file. Across from them, Ethan Parker and Mrs. Ramona Parker waited nervously. Ethan, about to start his residency at a prestigious hospital, looked exhausted. Mrs. Parker kept whispering to him, her face pale. The summons prepared by attorney Marks, detailing the countersuit and the damages claim for a total of $570,000, had completely destroyed their celebration. The mediator began the session, but before Ethan or his new lawyer could speak, attorney Marks cut in. Thank you for your time. My client, Mrs. Valerie, is here to respond to Mr. Parker's divorce petition. However, we reject that petition. Ethan looked up, confused. What do you mean you reject it? We reject it, attorney Marks said firmly, because my client will be the one filing for divorce. And it has already been submitted. He handed the mediator a stack of documents. A divorce filing citing adultery, financial fraud, and psychological abuse. That's slander. Mrs. Parker shouted, furious. Stop making things up. Attorney Marks continued without acknowledging her. We've also attached a claim for the education and living expenses my client covered for 5 years to finance Mr. Parker's medical studies. He opened the file. Here we detail all evidence. Biannual transfers, receipts for books, practice materials, rent payments, and a breakdown of daily food expenses my client transferred to Mr. Parker's account. The total amounted to $570,000. Ethan was stunned, his face instantly draining of color. $570,000 was a staggering sum. His starting salary as a resident wouldn't reach even a tenth of that in a year. Mrs. Parker gasped for air. Their lawyer could only swallow hard at the sight of the flawless pile of evidence. This is blackmail, Ethan managed to say, his voice trembling between anger and fear. That was a wife's duty. Valerie, are you insane? Valerie, who had remained silent the whole time, finally spoke. She looked straight at Ethan. A wife's duty? A wife you said wasn't on your level? A wife you were ashamed of? A wife you abandoned on your graduation night? Her voice was flat but sharp as a blade. I'm not insane, Ethan. I'm simply collecting what belongs to me. A suffocating silence fell over the room. Neither Ethan nor Mrs. Parker could argue against such overwhelming evidence. Then Valerie gave attorney Marks a small signal. He nodded seriously. His next words tightened Ethan's and Mrs. Parker's nerves even more. My client is a woman of great heart. She does not wish to prolong this process. Valerie stared directly at Ethan. I will withdraw the damages claim of $570,000. Ethan and Mrs. Parker's mouths fell open in disbelief. But under a few conditions, Valerie added quickly. First, you will accept my divorce petition. The cause must be clearly recorded, betrayal and abandonment. I want my honor back. Ethan clenched his jaw. The humiliation devoured him. Second, there will be no division of assets. I will take nothing from that house, and you will not be allowed to demand anything from me. Ever. We end this in peace. Third, you will sign an agreement stating that neither you nor your mother will ever bother me or my family again. Fourth, everything is settled today. No appeals. No delays. Ethan looked at Mrs. Parker. Terrified at the idea of having to sell her house to pay the debt, she nodded immediately. Fine, sign it already, Ethan, she whispered in panic. Pride meant nothing compared to a debt like that. With hands trembling from shame and relief, Ethan signed. The divorce process was nearly instantaneous. The judge's gavel fell. Valerie was officially free. She walked out of the courthouse without looking back, leaving Ethan slumped in his chair and Mrs. Parker crying with relief. That afternoon, Valerie finished packing her last belongings into an old suitcase in Marissa Lane's studio. She had sold the rest of her jewelry and managed to gather enough money to start a new life. Valerie, that $570,000 was yours. You could have bought yourself an apartment, Marissa said, still unable to understand. Valerie closed the suitcase. I don't want it, Marissa. If I accept that money, I'll stay tied to resentment. It's dirty money. Money soaked in humiliation. To me, I paid $570,000 for a very expensive life lesson. And I'm not repeating it. Then, where will you go? Valerie smiled. It was the first truly genuine smile she'd had in weeks. I'm going to continue with my dream. The one I abandoned. I want to go back to university. I want to write. I still have a brain, Marissa. I still have ambition. She held Marissa by the shoulders. I'm leaving this city. I'll disappear from Ethan and his mother's life. I'm going to use all this pain to build something big. One day they'll hear my name, and then they'll know who truly wasn't on their level. She hugged Marissa tightly. Take care. And don't tell anyone where I am. Of course, Valerie. Chase your dreams. Make them regret it. That night, Valerie headed to the bus terminal. She deliberately chose a small, distant town, somewhere no one would know her. As the bus began leaving behind the dazzling city that had caused her so much pain, Valerie looked out the window. She didn't cry. She only felt deep relief. She left with one suitcase, years of unpaid sacrifice, and a firm promise to herself. A year passed. On the 15th floor of the most prestigious private hospital in Denver, a young man walked with confidence. His white coat was perfectly pressed. An expensive stethoscope hung around his neck, not just as a tool but as a symbol of prestige. The badge on his chest said proudly, Dr. Ethan Parker. He was the new surgical prodigy. Smart, quick, confident. Despite his young age, he was trusted with complex procedures. His superiors admired him, the nurses followed him with their gaze, and his colleagues viewed him as an example. Ethan had achieved everything he wanted. His life with Valerie was a blurry, almost non-existent memory. Sometimes he didn't even remember her name. When he did, he saw it as an embarrassment, a step he had to crush to reach where he was. Divorcing Valerie was the best decision, he told himself in the mirror of his luxurious penthouse. To him, Valerie had been a burden. Now he was free. And he celebrated that freedom with luxury. He no longer lived in the small apartment he inherited from his father. He and Mrs. Parker now lived in an expensive penthouse in the center of Denver. The mortgage suffocated him, but he didn't care. Status was all that mattered. He traded his old motorcycle for a black Mercedes-Benz, financed over 7 years with outrageous interest rates. His resident salary was high, but not enough for the lifestyle he wanted to project. Every weekend he dined at fine dining restaurants, bought designer watches, luxury clothing, and joined an exclusive golf club. He was the perfect portrait of success. But behind that facade, a mountain of debt grew uncontrollably. He juggled 5 credit cards and requested bank loans under the excuse of remodeling the penthouse. Ethan's arrogance had fully infected Mrs. Parker, who now proudly flaunted, "My son the doctor." Her new status had pushed her into a social circle of businessmen's wives and high-ranking officials. And at every gathering she said the same. "Oh, my Ethan, darling. He is always performing important surgeries." "Last night he didn't come home until 3 in the morning, Mrs. Parker bragged one afternoon while stirring an expensive tea in a luxury hotel lobby. She knew perfectly well that Ethan hadn't been late because of a surgery but because he had gone to a party at an exclusive nightclub. Poor me, but what can you do? It's the call of a noble profession. That boy is so dedicated. "The new penthouse, you ask, darling?" she continued, answering herself. "Well, it's modest. 3 bedrooms overlooking the city. Ethan insisted that I move in. He said I should be comfortable in my old age. He's such a good son." While she talked endlessly, she kept pressuring Ethan to find a partner as soon as possible. But a few days later, during a performance review meeting Ethan was leading with young doctors, something happened. He was speaking with authority, pointing at the presentation screen, when he felt a sudden dizziness. His vision blurred, and he had to grab the edge of the table to steady himself. "Dr. Parker, are you all right?" a junior doctor asked when he saw his superior suddenly turn pale. Ethan straightened immediately. He cleared his throat. "I'm fine. Just a little tired. Too many surgeries. Let's continue." He ignored the strange pounding in his temples. It must be a migraine, he thought. Lack of sleep, too much coffee. But that supposed migraine started coming more often. Days later, while having lunch in the hospital cafeteria, still arrogant and criticizing the food, his hand, the one holding the spoon, trembled slightly. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough for his heart to race. "What is this?" he thought. He clenched his fist under the table, trying to control the trembling. He blamed the air conditioning. That night, in his luxurious penthouse, the symptom returned with brutal force. He had just stepped out of a hot shower and was getting ready to attend a dinner Mrs. Parker had organized to introduce him to a woman, Jenna. Standing in front of his large mirror, adjusting an expensive tie, the world suddenly tilted. A fierce stab shot through his head, like thousands of needles piercing his skull. His vision blurred and a piercing ringing filled his ears. He staggered backward and slammed into the dresser. Expensive perfume bottles crashed to the floor. What's happening?" he whispered, clutching his burning head. He collapsed. He couldn't breathe. Cold sweat drenched his face and shirt. As a doctor, he knew immediately this wasn't fatigue or a migraine. But his ego refused to accept it. The great Dr. Parker, at the peak of his career, cannot be sick. He dragged himself to the medicine cabinet, grabbed 2 high-dose painkillers and swallowed them without water. 15 minutes later, the pain began to ease. A dull pulse remained, but he could stand. He looked at his reflection in the cracked mirror. His face was deathly pale. His phone rang. It was Mrs. Parker. "Ethan, where are you? Jenna and her family are waiting. Don't you dare embarrass your mother." Ethan took a deep breath, gathering strength. "Yes, Mom. I'm on my way. Traffic," he lied. He fixed his hair in the mirror, though his body was still shaking. He saw the pile of credit card statements and car payment receipts. All that luxury suddenly looked cold and terrifying. "No. I'm fine," he muttered. "I just need to rest. Everything will go back to normal." He grabbed the keys to his black Mercedes-Benz and left, putting on once again the mask of success and arrogance. But that mask wouldn't last. A few days after the dizziness in his penthouse, the symptom returned at the worst possible moment. In the middle of the operating room. He was about to lead a simple appendectomy, a procedure he could perform with his eyes closed. He washed his hands, put on sterile gloves and asked for the scalpel. Then his hand trembled. At first it was slight, almost unnoticeable, but within seconds it turned into a violent shake. The scalpel nearly slipped from his fingers. "Doctor," his assistant said cautiously, watching him with alarm. Time froze. Ethan looked at his own hand, horrified. He couldn't control it. Cold sweat the size of corn kernels trickled down his temples. The glove is wrong. Change it," he tried to excuse himself. But when he tried to remove it, the tremor worsened. The nurse and assistant exchanged anxious looks. Ethan, the star surgeon known for his steady hands, was trembling as if he were freezing. "Dr. Parker, are you sure you're all right?" the assistant insisted, now genuinely worried. "I said I'm fine," he snapped, though he knew the truth. He couldn't continue. "Take over," he ordered tensely. "Suddenly I feel unwell, stomach acidity." He dropped the scalpel onto the tray and hurried out of the operating room, leaving his team confused. In the hallway, he tore off his mask and surgical cap. He leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. This wasn't fatigue. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a simple migraine. It was something that could destroy his career, his pride, his future. Everything depended on the steadiness of that hand, and that very hand had just betrayed him. "Ethan, you're a top doctor now. Don't repeat your mistake with your wife. Find someone on your level. Professor Kane's daughter is very pretty and graduated in Switzerland. Or how about Jenna? She's the daughter of the director of the hospital next door. Remember, marriage is now a social investment for your career, Mrs. Parker reminded him almost every day. Ethan simply nodded, enjoying his status as the most desirable bachelor. His days were filled with ostentation and debt. That night he arranged a secret appointment outside work hours. He scheduled it for 9 in the evening, long after clinic hours ended. Swallowing all his pride, he headed to the office of the head of neurology, Dr. Nicholas Beltran, a veteran doctor, calm, brilliant, and extremely dedicated. He was exactly the kind of doctor Ethan considered outdated and unfashionable. Ironically, Ethan's fate was now in Dr. Beltran's hands. "All right, Ethan, what's going on?" the doctor asked calmly when he saw him enter as if sneaking in. Ethan had left his coat in the car. He walked in like any other patient. "I'm experiencing strange symptoms. My hands shake and my vision becomes blurry very often." Dr. Nicholas Beltran listened carefully. His expression remained completely calm as he performed several basic neurological tests. "Lie down there. Follow the light. Close your eyes. Relax." Each instruction felt like a slap to Ethan's pride. The great doctor was now an obedient patient. After the physical exam, Dr. Beltran looked at him seriously. "We need to do an MRI of your brain and spinal cord first thing tomorrow morning." The next day, Ethan underwent all the tests, torn between fear and denial. He waited for the results in his office, pacing back and forth like a caged lion. Mrs. Parker called him several times, complaining about why he hadn't taken her to dinner at the L Hotel. "What's the point of my life being like this if I have a successful doctor as a son, Ethan?" "I'm busy, Mom," he shouted, hanging up. The phone rang again. It was Dr. Beltran. "The results are ready. Can you come to my office now?" Ethan's heart sank. He walked heavily into the veteran doctor's office. On the large screen behind the desk, his MRI results were displayed. Dr. Beltran didn't waste time. "Ethan, sit down. Look at this." He pointed to several abnormal white spots on the spinal cord and optic nerve. "This isn't a tumor or a stroke." "Then what is it?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "It's an autoimmune disease. Rare. Very aggressive." Ethan's world collapsed. The doctor continued. "Treatment here will only slow the progression. It won't reverse the damage already present. And since your profession is surgery, we need a radical solution." What solution?" "Tell me," Ethan insisted. "A hematopoietic stem cell transplant will reset your immune system. It's your only hope of holding a scalpel again." A spark of hope lit his eyes. "All right, let's do it. When can we schedule it?" Dr. Beltran let out a deep sigh. "This is the complicated part. That procedure is not available in the United States for your specific condition. It must be done abroad. Singapore or Germany." Ethan's heart began pounding again. "And how much does it cost?" The approximate estimate for the entire procedure, medical stay, and initial recovery is about $1,700,000. $1,700,000. The number hit him like an invisible hammer. He didn't have even a fraction of that. All his income went to paying for the black Mercedes-Benz, the mortgage on the luxury penthouse, Mrs. Parker's credit cards, and the fake lifestyle he was desperately maintaining. "And my insurance?" Ethan asked, hoping for a miracle. Dr. Beltran opened another file. "Your work insurance only covers registered severe illnesses. Yours is classified as rare, and HSCT for autoimmune diseases is still considered experimental by many insurers. The maximum coverage will be for diagnostic and initial treatment here. Maybe around $170,000. Ethan shook his head. "Impossible. This can't be happening," he whispered, laughing dryly, almost like crying. The great Dr. Parker, the surgeon, the man who had told his wife she wasn't on his level, was now completely ruined and facing a rare disease that could leave him blind and paralyzed. He stumbled out of the office. He reached his penthouse. Mrs. Parker was watching television in the luxurious living room. "Ethan, finally you're home. I ordered expensive dinner with your card. Let's eat." He looked at her with empty eyes. "I'm sick, Mom," he whispered. "Sick? I told you. It's not a cold. Ethan screamed, breaking down completely. I'm seriously ill. I need surgery abroad. It costs $1,700,000. The spoon Mrs. Parker was holding fell onto her porcelain plate. $1,700,000? Where are we supposed to get that money? We just paid for your new car's down payment. It's not a joke, Ethan shouted, completely shattered. I could go blind. I could end up paralyzed. My career is over and we have no money. We have nothing. We're ruined, Mom. Ruined. That night, in the luxurious penthouse with decades of mortgage ahead, the arrogant Dr. Parker finally cried like a child. Not because of the illness, but because he realized he didn't have a single dollar to save his life or his pride. Panic was like a silent room trapping him and Mrs. Parker inside. Ethan's scream, "We're ruined," echoed through the penthouse, bouncing off imported marble walls and expensive furniture still unpaid for, until it faded into an unbearable silence. Mrs. Parker, pale and trembling, was the first to break it, though not with compassion. No, this can't be," she whispered, her voice shaking. She didn't look at Ethan, who sat motionless on the floor. Her eyes scanned the room, the overpriced abstract painting, the crystal chandelier, the 80-inch flat screen. "We can't be ruined, Ethan. This penthouse, your car, my handbags, all of this." Ethan let out a dry, broken laugh. "That's the problem, Mom. All of this is an illusion." He stood and kicked the glass coffee table, sending it scraping across the marble floor. "This penthouse is a 20-year mortgage. And we've only made 10 payments. It's worth much less now than what we owe the bank. If we sell it, we'll still owe hundreds of thousands. And the Mercedes you brag about to your fancy little social circle?" Mrs. Parker kept shaking her head, refusing reality. "That car," Ethan dragged a hand down his face. "It's a 7-year loan. 7 years. The interest is suffocating us. If we sell it, it won't even cover the remaining debt. We have nothing. Only debt. Debt everywhere." Mrs. Parker gasped. She thought of the designer handbags stuffed in her closet. Her chest tightened. Nearly half were high-quality counterfeits she bought to impress her social circle without using Ethan's cards. They had been living a lie. Then, what do we do? $1,700,000. Mrs. Parker collapsed onto the expensive sofa. "My friends, the social circle. Mrs. Robles, the banker's wife. Mrs. Salgado, the construction magnate's wife. Surely they can help. They won't let their friends suffer." A tiny spark of hope flickered. Mrs. Parker grabbed her phone with shaking hands. She called Mrs. Robles. "Hello, Ramona, what's going on at this hour?" a cheerful voice answered. Darling, please help me. Help me." Mrs. Parker burst into hysterical sobs instantly. "It's Ethan. He's very sick, darling. He needs surgery that costs $1,700,000. Please lend me some money." A brief silence. The cheer vanished. $1,700,000, my God, Ramona. That's too much. I'm sorry. My husband is in an overseas meeting and I can't bother him, and I'm extremely busy organizing a charity event. I'll call you later, Ramona. She hung up. Mrs. Parker stared in shock. Tried calling again. Busy. She called Mrs. Salgado. Declined. Called again. Declined. She called Mrs. Cordero. "Oh, Ramona. We also need funds for a renovation. Terrible timing." All the friends who once praised her now avoided her like a plague. Mrs. Parker threw her phone onto the sofa. "They're liars, vipers." Ethan looked at her with disgust. "Now you realize they're only your friends when you have something to flaunt, just like my colleagues." Now it was his turn. He couldn't depend on his mother. He had to act even if his pride fought him. He drew a breath and called several medical colleagues. "Hey, Frederick, sorry to bother you this late." It was Frederick Carter, a fellow surgeon. "Oh, Dr. Parker, what's going on? Everything okay?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Listen, Frederick, a really good real estate investment came up abroad. I need urgent liquidity, somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million. Do you have anything?" A soft, mocking laugh came from the other end. "Well, Dr. Parker, playing in the big leagues now, With your new Mercedes and your new penthouse, I'm sure you're better at making money. Sorry, doctor. I just paid the down payment for my son's house. I'm broke. Good luck with your investment. The call ended. Ethan let out a strangled sound. Everyone thought he was rich. What irony. The arrogance he had built over the past year had now become a boomerang, preventing him from receiving help. He tried calling 2 more doctors. The answer was the same. I'm sorry, doctor, I don't have money right now. Desperate, he swallowed the last piece of his pride. He requested a meeting with the hospital director. Maybe he could confess his illness. Maybe the hospital would grant him an emergency loan. In the director's cold office, Ethan explained the situation without dramatics, just medical facts. The director listened with genuine sympathy. Dr. Parker, I'm very sorry. It's shocking news. Of course, we'll do everything possible so you can use your insurance to the fullest. But sir, the insurance only covers $170,000. I need $1,700,000. Can't the hospital lend me the rest? I don't care if you deduct it for 10 or 20 years. Ethan begged. His arrogance had vanished completely. The director slowly shook his head. Dr. Parker, we're a medical institution, not a bank. We can't assign such an enormous personal loan. Not even for you. Our policies are strict. The maximum support is whatever your insurance covers. The blow was harder than Dr. Beltran's diagnosis. Assets. Always assets. Ethan left the office with trembling legs. He was officially cornered. No friends. No colleagues. No institutions. No assets. He was alone. The following days were hell. Ethan had to request medical leave. The hospital approved it far too quickly, almost with relief, as if they wanted to get rid of a doctor with hand problems. Rumors spread uncontrollably. The symptoms worsened. That morning he woke up and the left edge of his visual field was slightly blurry, like covered by a thin veil. The disease wasn't waiting. He sat in the living room of his dark penthouse. The curtains were closed. Mrs. Parker had locked herself in her room. Ethan, crying or asleep, he no longer knew. He didn't care. He looked at the phone in his hand. His contact list was full, but he felt empty. He began deleting names. Mrs. Robles, blocked. Frederick Carter, flatterer. Jenna, opportunist. He erased dozens of contacts without thinking. The screen became almost empty, containing only a few essential names. Relatives from his hometown who had no money. Then his finger stopped at the M. Marissa. The name froze on the screen. Marissa, Valerie's friend. The only person who might know where Valerie was. His ordinary ex-wife, the woman he abandoned for not being on his level. A suffocating wave of shame burned his face. Contacting Marissa was the lowest possible action, a complete surrender. It meant admitting he had failed entirely. But on the other hand, Valerie was the only person in this world who had ever given him everything without conditions. He remembered her last words in that restaurant. You will both regret this. And that regret was here now, not as guilt but as an asphyxiating sentence in the shape of blindness and paralysis. He stared at Marissa's name on the screen. His hand trembled violently from illness and fear. He had to do it. He had no other choice. The confidence he once used to humiliate Valerie was now the size of a grain of dust. For almost an hour he stared at the name, unable to press the button. Every time he lifted his finger, he heard Mrs. Parker's cynical laugh and his own arrogant voice. We're not on the same level. Shame burned his throat like acid. Contacting Marissa was raising the white flag. It meant admitting that Valerie, the woman he had called ordinary, was his last hope. While he hesitated, his left eye pulsed again, and the blurry shadow at the edge seemed to grow darker. The fear of going blind outweighed any pride. He inhaled deeply and swallowed his pride whole. He pressed the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Just when he thought Marissa wouldn't answer, the call connected. There was no greeting. Only silence. Oh, hi, Ethan said in a hoarse voice. Hi, Marissa. All he heard was a contemptuous sigh. Well, the respected Dr. Parker still had my number saved. Marissa's voice was like a knife. What a surprise. Ma. I'm sorry for calling so late. Sorry, she laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. It's been over a year since you threw my friend away like trash and now you call to say you're sorry? Don't you think you're a little late? No, it's not that. Ethan wiped sweat from his face. I wanted to know, how is Valerie? Marissa's laughter vanished instantly. The silence turned razor sharp. What did you just say? She asked in a voice so dangerous it sent a cold shiver down Ethan's spine. How is Valerie? After a whole year without caring whether she lived or died. Do you really have the nerve to ask? Please, Marissa, I'm begging you. His voice cracked. I need to talk to her. It's a life or death matter. Life or death, she scoffed. What's wrong? Ran out of money? Need her to pay for another medical specialty for you? I get it. You're sick. The truth in those words hit him like a slap. Ethan couldn't answer. I knew it. Marissa shouted. I knew it. You're in trouble, aren't you? You and your mother were always parasites. You thought Valerie was an ATM you could use whenever you wanted. Marissa, please. Just listen. I don't want to listen to you, she snapped. Listen carefully, Ethan. Valerie is happy. She rebuilt her life from the ruins you created. And she has forgotten parasites like you and your mother. Don't ever bother her again. Don't even try contacting me. The call ended abruptly. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. Please, wait, he tried calling again, but the line went straight to busy. She had blocked him. He threw the phone onto the sofa and paced across his dark living room, desperate. Marissa was his only link to Valerie, and that link had just been slammed shut. Mrs. Parker came out of her room with swollen eyes. What happened, Ethan? Did you get a loan? Shut up, Mom, he yelled. This is your fault too. If you hadn't pushed me, maybe Valerie would have forgiven me. How is any of this my fault? You wanted this. You said you were ashamed of her, she shot back. Arguing was pointless. Ethan grabbed his phone again. He couldn't call, but he could send a message. With hands shaking violently from illness and desperation, he typed. Marissa, I know you hate me. I deserve it. But please, it's a matter of life and death. He pressed send. His hope was almost non-existent, but it was all he had. An hour later, a notification appeared. It was from Marissa. Ethan's heart jumped. He opened it quickly. It wasn't an address. Not a phone number. Not help. Simply said, do you really think Valerie is still the same as before? The ordinary woman you could crush whenever you wanted? Do you really think she'll cry for you just because you're sick? That's hilarious. Ethan fell to his knees. But another message followed. The Valerie of today is far too busy running her new Valerie Morgan Foundation to remember trash from the past. If you really need help, find her yourself. Don't be a coward. That single word, foundation, stuck in Ethan's mind. Foundation. Valerie, the woman he had called ordinary, had a foundation? Was it a lie? A trap? Another humiliation? With trembling hands, he rushed to the laptop on the table. His left eye was so blurry he had to lean in close just to read. He opened the search bar and typed Valerie Morgan Foundation. The first result froze him. It wasn't a random social page or a simple blog. It was a professional website. Valerie Morgan Foundation. His heart nearly stopped. He clicked. The homepage was elegant and formal. At the top was a photograph of Valerie, but not the Valerie he remembered. The woman in the photo wore a perfectly tailored dark blue blazer. Her hair was cut into a sharp modern bob framing her face. She stood in front of a contemporary building, offering a confident, distant smile. Behind her, a large silver plaque read, Valerie Morgan Foundation, spreading good, building the future. Ethan scrolled with a trembling hand. He read, founded by Valerie Morgan, author of the autobiographical bestseller, Rising from the Ashes. A best-selling author. When had Valerie written a book? He read on and reached the section Our Main Programs. There were several, but one made his blood run cold. Beacon Scholars Grant. Full scholarships and emergency surgery funding for medical students from disadvantaged backgrounds. The laptop nearly slipped from his lap. Ethan's throat tightened painfully. This was impossible. A joke. A nightmare. His ex-wife, Valerie, the woman he had dismissed for not being on his level, was now the founder of a major organization dedicated, ironically, to financing medical studies and emergency surgeries. The cruelty of the irony made him feel nauseous. He rushed to search for news about her and found dozens of articles, interviews in business magazines and appearances on morning shows. Valerie's face was everywhere. Valerie Morgan turns pain into real action. With the millions earned from royalties, the Valerie Foundation is ready to prepare new generations of doctors. Ethan stared at the laptop screen and then at the pile of overdue bills on his desk. He pressed a hand against his left eye. It hurt and his vision narrowed more and more. Marissa had been right. The Valerie of today was no longer the woman from the past. She was unreachable. She held the key to every problem in his life. And she was also the person he had hurt more than anyone. The cold blue glow of the screen lit the dark penthouse living room. Valerie, smiling with dignity on the Valerie Foundation website, hit him harder than Dr. Beltran's diagnosis. That night Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat motionless, the MRI results in one hand and the other shaking uncontrollably. His left eye burned. His vision shrank even further. The disease was advancing without mercy. The irony was perfect, cruel, and precise. The woman he had abandoned for not being on his level was now the only person in the world dedicated to helping cases just like his. In her room, Mrs. Parker no longer cried. She simply stayed silent. The shock she had received was so great that she couldn't even process what was happening. Her social circle had completely pushed her out. Her extra credit cards had been blocked by the bank. She was trapped just like her son. Ethan knew he had no other choice. Shame, pride, arrogance, none of it mattered now. If he didn't act, he would go blind and paralyzed. He had to see Valerie. He had to crush the last bit of his pride. Then came the first problem. He didn't have a single dollar in cash. All his credit cards were maxed out. He looked at the keys to his Mercedes. Useless. The finance company controlled everything. His eyes fell on the luxury watch on his wrist, his only real asset, though even that had been bought in installments. He took it off. "Damn it," he muttered. He threw on a jacket over his pajamas and rushed out. He went to a pawn shop near the market, a place he would have despised in the past. Dr. Parker had to stand in line behind women pawning cheap jewelry. The watch was valued at an insultingly low price, but it was enough to pay for a round-trip taxi to the Foundation's address and a cheap meal. He chose the cheapest option, a standard taxi. The ride to the Denver Financial District, where the Valerie Foundation headquarters were located, felt like approaching his own execution. Used to driving his Mercedes with arrogance, he now sat in the back seat of a small car that smelled of cheap air freshener. He looked out the window at the skyscrapers he once considered his playground. The taxi stopped in front of a massive glass building. The marble floors gleamed under the lights and elegant revolving doors reflected the morning sun. A huge silver plaque shone above the entrance. Valerie Foundation. Ethan paid the driver with what little money he had left and stood trembling on the sidewalk. This was real. Not just a website. A small empire. He smoothed his wrinkled jacket and felt like a beggar. With heavy steps he pushed open the glass doors. The lobby looked nothing like he expected. It wasn't the small, underfunded office of a struggling nonprofit. It looked like the lobby of a five-star hotel. Elegant, professional, full of energy. Several interns in crisp uniforms, likely beneficiaries of the Beacon Scholars Grant, walked briskly with stacks of documents. The walls were decorated with large photographs. Valerie shaking hands with a university president. Valerie opening a community center in a rural town. Valerie, smiling, surrounded by medical students who looked at her with admiration. Ethan's heart twisted painfully. All of it had been built by Valerie out of the pain he had caused her. He approached the reception desk, a solid mahogany counter. A young receptionist greeted him immediately. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you? Do you have an appointment?" A knot closed Ethan's throat. The receptionist maintained her professional smile, firm as armor. "I'm very sorry, sir, But without a scheduled appointment I can't interrupt her meetings. If you'd like to leave a message I can. I told you it's a life-or-death emergency, he shouted, desperate. His hands trembled so violently he had to hide them in his jacket pockets. Several employees and visitors turned to look. The receptionist swallowed nervously, her hand drifting toward the phone to call security. What's all this noise? A deep, calm, familiar voice said from the direction of the private elevator. Ethan froze. He recognized that voice. He turned slowly. There, in a perfectly tailored gray suit, stood Attorney Henry Marks, Valerie's lawyer. His expression was calm, but the gaze behind his glasses was sharper than ever. He no longer looked like the humble attorney defending an oppressed wife. He looked like a high-level corporate legal advisor. Attorney Marks studied Ethan without surprise, only cold observation. He stepped closer. Mr. Parker, I didn't expect to see you again, and certainly not here. Ethan swallowed hard, his shame mixed with a cruel, suffocating fear. Attorney Marks. You still remember me? The attorney gave a faint smile. Oh, I never forget a potential client who could have earned me $570,000, and I also don't forget the one who let that opportunity slip. He then glanced at the receptionist. All right, Renee. I'll take care of this gentleman. He gestured for Ethan to follow him toward a more private area, a waiting room with comfortable leather sofas. Ethan sat on the edge, stiff as a statue. The attorney settled in across from him, crossed one leg over the other and said, What brings Mr. Parker here after more than a year? Don't tell me you've changed your mind about the $570,000 and want to pay it now, right? No, Ethan interrupted quickly. It's not that. I'm sick, sir. Seriously sick. I know, Attorney Marks replied coldly. Ethan's eyes widened. How do you know? Mississippi Lane, the friend of Ms. Morgan, called her last night. After receiving your message, she told her everything about the transplant and your need for $1,700,000. Ethan froze. So Marissa had informed her. Valerie knew he was coming. Everything was prepared. He felt like a cornered rat. Then, where is Valerie? He whispered. Is she going to help me? She still cares. The attorney didn't answer. He looked at Ethan with an unreadable expression. Then he picked up a thick, glossy brochure from the coffee table and slid it toward him without a word. It was the official brochure of the Valerie Foundation. Ethan's trembling hand opened it. On the second page was the mission and vision of the foundation. On the third, its main program, Beacon Scholars Grant, full funding and emergency surgery coverage for high-performing medical students and professionals. Everything was there. Clear, irrefutable. Ethan looked up desperately. Sir, this program, it means Valerie will help me, right? Attorney Marks leaned back on the sofa. He studied Ethan for a long moment before speaking in a calm, chilling voice. It is true that Ms. Morgan created this organization to help people. But Mr. Parker, this program has a procedure. What procedure? I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes. The attorney gave another faint smile. Good. In that case, go back to the reception desk. Why? Ethan asked, confused. To pick up a form, the attorney replied. The application form for medical assistance beneficiaries. You must fill it out completely and attach a low-income certification issued by the County Social Services Office, a statement of your debts, the official diagnosis from Dr. Beltran, and of course, a letter of recommendation. Then our team will evaluate whether you meet the requirements. Ethan froze. A low-income certification. Dr. Ethan Parker, the star surgeon, would have to go to a municipal office and ask for a poverty certificate. Mr. Parker, the attorney continued, you are not here as an ex-husband seeking compassion. You are here as an applicant. Supplicant. Just like the dozens of people who come here every day. Now go. And collect the form. Ethan stumbled out of the lobby of the Valerie Foundation. His body felt heavy and light at the same time, as if his soul had stayed behind. In his hand he carried a brochure and several pages of the application form, pages that felt heavier than Dr. Beltran's diagnosis. Application form for medical assistance beneficiaries. Low-income certificate issued by the Municipal Social Services Office. The words danced before his increasingly blurred eyes. Yes. Dr. Ethan Parker, whose photograph had once appeared in the hospital's internal magazine, now had to beg for a poverty certificate at a municipal office. It was a level of humiliation he had never imagined. Attorney Marks didn't even accompany him to the door. He let him walk out alone, passing by the curious stares of young employees who had seen him enter alongside the attorney and now watched him leave pale and shaken. When he reached his penthouse, once a symbol of success, now a luxurious prison, Mrs. Parker met him immediately at the entrance. "What happened, Ethan? Did you see Valerie? She said she would help you. She still cares, right, honey?" Ethan didn't answer. He walked to the dining table and threw the form onto it. "Read it," he whispered. Mrs. Parker grabbed the papers. Her eyes widened as she read the title of the document. "What is this? Why do you have to fill out a form? She's your ex-wife." Then her eyes fell on the list of requirements. Attach a low-income beneficiary certificate issued by the Municipal Social Services Office. Her voice turned sharp. "Valerie is insane. She wants to humiliate us. She wants to force us to beg her." "She succeeded, Mom," Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. He hit the wall, but his hand trembled so badly it barely made a sound. "She made me a beggar. Do you think I have another choice? Do you want me to go blind? Do you want to watch me in a wheelchair in this penthouse the bank will repossess next month?" Mrs. Parker fell silent, pale as a sheet. Reality crushed her without mercy. "Grab your purse, Mom," Ethan ordered coldly. "We're going to the social services office right now." "But son, it's embarrassing," she whispered. "What embarrasses you more? Asking for help? Or the debt collectors kicking you out of this penthouse in front of all your friends?" Mrs. Parker couldn't respond. She dressed with trembling hands, put on oversized sunglasses and a mask, trying to hide her identity. The trip was the most humiliating of their lives. They couldn't use the Mercedes. The payments were overdue, so they hailed a taxi which dropped them off right in front of the chipped door of the municipal office. As soon as they entered, every gaze turned toward them. Employees typing non-stop, citizens lining up for assistance. The scene looked like a cruel cartoon. Mrs. Parker clutching a knockoff handbag under her arm, and Dr. Parker, once known for his promising medical career, now sitting on an old cracked orange plastic chair. "Hey, isn't that Dr. Parker, the one from the penthouse?" whispered one employee. "Yeah, what's he doing here?" "This is the social assistance window." Ethan lowered his eyes, pressing his trembling hands against his knees. Mrs. Parker pretended to be busy with her phone, turned off. When their turn came, Ethan stepped toward the counter with heavy steps. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you?" "I want to request a low-income beneficiary certificate," Ethan murmured. The clerk looked at him in surprise. "For whom?" "For me. Ethan Parker." The clerk looked him up and down. "Are you Dr. Parker? The one from the penthouse?" "Sorry, but you don't look like it." "I'm sick," Ethan shouted, losing control. "I'm seriously sick. I need a surgery that costs $1,700,000. I'm not working anymore. I'm ruined. I have no money. Is that clear? Just give me the form." The entire office fell silent. Mrs. Parker nearly fainted from shame. Finally, after an endless process filled with whispers and heavy stares, the painful document ended up in Ethan's hands. A low-income beneficiary certificate. The official stamp burned in his palm like hot iron. That night he couldn't sleep. Under the dim light of a lamp, he completed the Valerie Foundation application page by page. Applicant's name, Ethan Parker. Occupation, inactive surgeon. He reached the debt section and began writing, swallowing his pride with every line. Riverside Tower penthouse mortgage, $1 million. S-Class vehicle loan, $170,000. Bank A credit card, $30,000. Bank B credit card, $17,600. Bank C loan, $11,700. Total, $1,400,000. In the assets section he wrote only one word. None. He attached the municipal certificate, the debt letters, and the diagnosis from Dr. Beltran. It was a perfect file of his collapse. The next morning he returned to the foundation. He looked even worse, unshaven, red-eyed, clothes wrinkled. He handed the packet to Miss Collins, the receptionist, who maintained her professional smile. "Sir, I'll take it. Our team will review it. Please take a seat." Ethan waited. 1 hour. 2. 3. He watched smiling medical students pass by, young people who were probably already recipients of Valerie's grants. Then Attorney Marks appeared from the elevator. "Mr. Parker, Ms. Morgan will see you now." Ethan's heart nearly stopped. He followed the attorney like a lamb walking to the slaughter. They rode the private elevator to the top floor. The doors opened directly into a massive corner office made of glass walls, offering a panoramic view of the city. And there, behind a large mahogany desk, Valerie Morgan was seated. Ethan stopped breathing for a moment. The Valerie he saw now surpassed every photograph he had found online. She wore an elegant modern bun, an emerald silk blouse, and an expression carved from stone. She didn't lift her eyes immediately. "Ms. Morgan, Mr. Parker is here," Attorney Henry Marks announced. Valerie finished reading, then slowly raised her head and looked at him. Her eyes. That was what had changed the most. They held no love. No anger. Only a calm, sharp, professional coldness. The eyes of someone who had risen from ashes and rebuilt herself. "Mr. Parker, sit down," she said, her voice flat, with not a hint of familiarity. Ethan obeyed stiffly, feeling more like a defendant than a patient. In the corner, Attorney Marks stood silently watching. On the desk lay the MRI results, the diagnosis from Dr. Beltran, and the thick file Ethan had submitted that morning. "We reviewed your application," Valerie began calmly. "The diagnosis by Dr. Nicholas Beltran confirms your condition is progressing rapidly. We also verified the hospital estimate in Singapore. The procedure costs $1,700,000. She flipped another page. "And you have accumulated more than $1,400,000 in personal debt in just 1 year. That is impressive." Ethan's face flushed with shame. "Valerie, I know I made mistakes. She lifted her hand slightly. A tiny gesture, but enough to silence him completely. "Mr. Parker, I am not here to listen to your apologies. That belongs to your private life and has no value in this office." "Then, why am I here?" he asked quietly. "To discuss a business matter," she said without blinking. "The Valerie Foundation is a legal entity. If we invest $1,700,000 into your surgery and another $1,400,000 to pay off your debts, we are making a very large investment. And before investing, one must evaluate whether the asset is worth the cost." Ethan's heart dropped. An asset? Are you calling me an asset?" "Of course," Valerie replied with absolute coldness. "You are a trained surgeon. You have valuable skills. It would be a waste to let you go blind or become paralyzed. But you also have a terrible record of managing the investment someone else made in you for 5 years." Ethan lowered his head. He had no argument. "Valerie, please, are you going to reject me?" She observed him in silence for several long seconds. "No. Your application has been approved." Ethan exhaled shakily, almost crying with relief. "Thank you, Valerie. Really. I swear I'm not finished," she cut him off with the same icy tone. "The Valerie Foundation will cover the full cost of your surgery in Singapore. We will also clear all your debts, the Riverside Tower penthouse mortgage, the Mercedes S-Class loan, all your credit cards." He blinked, stunned. "You'll cover the car payments? And the mortgage?" "Correct," Valerie confirmed. "I do not want debt collectors harassing our asset during recovery." "Valerie, I don't even know what to say." "Say nothing. This is not a gift. This is not charity or compassion," she said sharply. "This is a contract." Valerie rose and walked toward the panoramic window. The skyline shone behind her. When she turned back, her eyes were hard as glass. "The Valerie Foundation will invest a total of $3 million in you. Once you recover, you will no longer be an independent physician. You will be an asset of the foundation. Ethan was speechless. Attorney Mark stepped forward and placed a thick black leather folder on the desk. "Read it, Mr. Parker. This is your employment contract." Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it. It wasn't a page. It was dozens, full of clauses. Debt transfer agreements, exclusive service provisions, obligations, penalties. Valerie explained in a tone fit for a financial presentation. First, the Valerie Foundation will settle the $3 million within 24 hours. $1,700,000 for your transplant, and $1,400,000 to pay off the penthouse mortgage, the car loan, and all your credit cards. Second, all assets tied to those debts, meaning the Riverside Tower penthouse and the Mercedes S-Class, will be transferred to the foundation to offset part of the cost. Attorney Marks's team will handle the eviction tomorrow morning. You and your mother have until tonight to pack. Eviction? And where am I supposed to live? Ethan whispered. Third, the Valerie Foundation will provide you with basic housing during the term of the contract. Specifically, a small room in the staff residence at St. Christopher Community Clinic. Fourth, you will work exclusively for the foundation. The standard salary for a physician in our clinic is $4,700 per month. After deducting the value of your seized assets, you still owe $1,700,000. Therefore, your service contract will have an initial duration of 32 years. 32 years. Ethan's entire body weakened. Sounded like a life sentence. If you work exceptionally well, Valerie added, the Valerie Foundation has an early release program for outstanding assets. If you demonstrate extraordinary service in a remote area, the contract may be reviewed. A remote area? Ethan whispered. Did you really think I'd send you to a private hospital in Denver, Mr. Parker? Valerie allowed herself a faint smile. You'll be assigned to a small clinic in a mountain town in Colorado, 8 hours from the city. He closed his eyes. There was no choice. Sign a 32-year contract in the middle of nowhere, or go blind, paralyzed, and drown in debt. I'll sign, he whispered. A smart decision, Valerie replied. She handed him a fine, expensive pen. Ethan's hand shook, part illness, part the knowledge that he was sealing his own fate. He signed page after page while Attorney Henry Marks pointed to each line. Good, Valerie said at last when she saw the final signature. Attorney Marks will accompany you to the bank to open the new trust account under the foundation's name and will arrange your departure to Singapore the day after tomorrow. Work hard, Dr. Parker. She turned back to her computer screen, dismissing him entirely as if he no longer existed. 2 days later, Attorney Marks's team arrived at the Riverside Tower penthouse to begin the eviction. Mrs. Ramona Parker, convinced that Valerie would change her mind and allow them to stay, collapsed into hysterical sobbing. Valerie, you're cruel. How can you do this to us? This is our home. Where are we supposed to live? Attorney Marks didn't flinch. He showed her the signed and valid foreclosure order. I'm sorry, ma'am. The Valerie Foundation has already covered the full mortgage. According to the contract signed by Mr. Ethan Parker, this property is now owned by the foundation. You have 1 hour to gather your belongings. The once proud Mrs. Parker, who had spent years looking down on Valerie, now had to stuff her clothes into a suitcase while hearing the neighbors whisper. Ethan's Mercedes S-Class was towed out of the underground garage under everyone's curious gaze. Later, Mrs. Parker was taken by taxi to a tiny rental apartment on the outskirts of the city. The Valerie Foundation paid only the first 3 months. After that, she would have to fend for herself. Meanwhile, Ethan underwent the surgery in Singapore. Everything went well. The stem cell transplant successfully reset his immune system. Recovery was long, quiet, and painfully lonely. There was no Mrs. Parker caring for him, no colleagues visiting. Only a nurse hired by the foundation. 2 months later, Ethan returned to the United States fully recovered. His hands no longer trembled and his vision was clear again. But he was no longer a free man. A foundation employee met him at the airport, handed him a plain shirt with the Valerie Foundation logo, and took him straight to the bus terminal. 8 hours on a sweltering bus, followed by 2 more hours in a farm truck down a dirt road. Eventually they arrived at St. Christopher Community Clinic, a small white building surrounded by cornfields. There was no air conditioning, only fans. No advanced technology, just a stethoscope, a blood pressure cuff, and basic medicine. The former star surgeon now treated coughs, stomach issues, colds, and assisted in childbirth with minimal equipment. At first Ethan was furious, humiliated, trapped. But he had no other choice. Each day he worked under the strict supervision of the clinic's director. In Denver, Mrs. Parker's life collapsed completely. The foundation's support ran out. She had to sell her handbags, including the counterfeit ones she had bragged about to her social circle. The same woman who once insulted Valerie now washed dishes in a restaurant to survive. And every time she saw Valerie on television, now a respected philanthropist, she cried in her tiny apartment, drowning in regret. Months passed. Ethan began to adapt. For the first time he found something he had never experienced before: sincerity. The townspeople thanked him even for the simplest care. He treated a boy's broken arm using only basic tools. Slowly he understood that being a doctor had never been about status or luxury. One afternoon a helicopter landed in the fields, stunning everyone. Ethan, who was dressing a farmer's wound, looked up. From the helicopter stepped Valerie Morgan, accompanied by attorney Henry Marks. They had come for a routine inspection. Dressed in a crisp linen shirt, Valerie entered the clinic. She saw Ethan, suntanned, sweating through the foundation uniform shirt. She didn't greet him personally. She reviewed inventory logs, patient records, reports. She stopped in front of him just as he comforted a crying child afraid of a vaccine. The hand that once trembled from illness and arrogance was now steady and warm. Their eyes met for a brief moment. Ethan lowered his head. "Good morning, Ms. Morgan. The patient report is on the director's desk," he said respectfully. Valerie looked at him for a moment. There was no anger in her eyes anymore, only the objective gaze of a leader looking at her employee. "Good work, Dr. Parker. Keep it up. You still have 31.5 years left." She turned around and walked back to the helicopter. Ethan watched her leave. He let out a long breath, feeling the weight in his chest. He finally understood that Valerie was in the sky, and he was on the ground. She had won. She had not only taken back what was hers. She had not only avenged herself. She had rebuilt her life, and his as well, shaping him not into an arrogant husband, but into a doctor who finally understood his purpose. Life had taught him the harshest lesson. Arrogance is a debt with the highest interest rate. It always comes due when we least expect it. Sincerity, on the other hand, always returns multiplied. If this story touched your heart, please support us by clicking like and subscribing to the channel. New stories are already waiting for you on your screen.